This is the vehicle that will put Zeekr on the map in Australia, and that's not hyperbole. Put it this way, across all of 2025, Zeekr sold just over 600 vehicles. But this one, it's not even on sale yet, and they're already holding more than 2,000 orders. For one, it's a mid-size SUV, so it's launching straight into Australia's sweet spot. Plus, it's got mega fast charging, proper performance, decent range, and plenty of kit. So, is this the car that can help Zeekr finally crack the Australian market? Let's go find out.
There are 3 ways into the 7X, with 2 rear drive models and 1 all-wheel drive performance completing the trilogy. That story begins with the 7X rear drive, which gets the smallest battery and lists at $57,900 before on-road costs. Next is the long range at $63,900, which is also a rear drive model, and it gets a bigger battery and a longer driving range. Finally, the performance is $72,900, and it's the only twin motor model in the lineup. It scores the same 100 kWh battery as the long range, but significantly ups the performance, which in turn dramatically lowers the 0 to 100 km/h time. Standard kit is pretty impressive across the board, with the entry-level model scoring 19-inch alloys, LED lighting all around, a powered boot, and a glass roof with a powered shade, and ambient interior lighting too. Tech is handled by a 16-inch central touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. There's 2 50-watt wireless charge pads as well, and you also get a digital dash, tri-zone climate, and a 10-speaker stereo. The long-range model then adds a better 21-speaker stereo and a head-up display, while the flagship performance gets the tricky auto opening and closing doors. You just push a button on the pillar to open them and then step on the brake to close them, as well as real Napa leather trim and 21-inch alloys.
It's a pretty sleek looking SUV, this 7X, and nowhere near as boundary pushing as something like the Polestar 4, with which this shares a platform. For one, this one has a rear windscreen. Now, Zeekr calls the design language hidden energy, which I take to mean, at least partly, you can't immediately tell what's powering it. At a glance, it could be an ICE, a hybrid, a PHEV, or an EV, and you don't really figure it out until you look a little more closely. Now, there's light bars front and rear, and this area here is reserved for what's called the light curtain, this kind of heavily pixelated wall of light that shines out of the front of the vehicle. Now, unfortunately, that design element didn't make it to Australia, but even without it, I do dig its kind of sporty yet family-friendly proportions. Now, inside, it's actually a fairly subtle feeling space, and that's not something you can say about all Chinese brands. Some of them do feel a little over the top, both outside and in, but that's not the case here. It feels understated, it feels polished, and it feels really quite premium. I love some of the material choices. I love the big central screen and the digital dashboard, and I love the fact that your 2 wireless charge pads are 50 watts each, and they both have a cooling function for your phone. Now, EV platforms are usually a boon for backseat riders, and that's certainly the case here too. I'm 175 centimeters. I'm sitting behind my own driving position. As you can see, tons of knee room, tons of headroom, and clever storage abounds in this car as well. There's a big central bin between the front seats, but also these little drawers underneath the back seats, I suppose so you can hide some expensive stuff if you're going to the beach. Now, there is one quirk though. There are USB charge ports back here, but they are hidden in this pull-down divider. You lift this flap and you can find a USB-C and a USB-A port. The only downside is, I suppose, if you've got 3 across the back, you're not charging your devices. Now, when it comes to boot space, obviously it's an auto-opening boot. Bring it up and you will find a 539 litre space here. It's nice and flat, nice and wide, and there's even a little bit of underfloor storage as well. Of course, that number grows when you drop those rear seats. There's also a frunk, at least in the rear-wheel drive models, which gives you a little bit more storage up front.
The 2 rear-drive 7X models share the same rear-mounted motor and both produce 310 kilowatts and 440 newton meters. Not stratospheric-sounding numbers, I'll grant you, but the powertrain delivers plenty of usable real-world grunt, with both variants reporting a 0 to 100 km/h time of around 6 seconds.
But this one, it's the performance. It's the only twin motor model in the 7X lineup, and it makes a massive 475 kilowatts and 710 newton meters, or enough to push this family-friendly SUV to 100 kilometers an hour in just 3.8 seconds. It's also the only one to nab standard air suspension.
The cheapest 7X variant scores a 75 kilowatt-hour LFP battery, while the long range and performance both score a 100 kilowatt-hour NCM unit.
Now, all 7X variants ride on an 800-volt architecture, which unlocks mega fast charging. In fact, Zeekr says this is set up for 450 kilowatt DC fast charging. The only slight fly in that electrified ointment is the fact that we actually don't have any 450 kilowatt DC chargers in Australia. But even using our 350 kilowatt units, the brand reckons every variant will go from 10 to 80% charge in 16 minutes or less. And they're set up for 22 kilowatt AC charging as well.
In terms of driving range, you can expect 480 kilometres in the rear drive, 615 kilometres in the long range, and 543 kilometres in the performance, all on the WLTP cycle.
So why am I wearing this astonishingly big white helmet when I'm driving a family electric SUV? That's a very good question. It's because this is the 7X Performance, the twin motor variant, which produces plenty of power, tons of torque, and a 0 to 100 kilometer an hour time of 3.8 seconds. Now, for the record, I was in a Porsche Carrera GTS recently. That was 0 to 100 in 3 seconds flat. So this one is only 0.8 of a second slower, despite being a lot bigger and a lot heavier. Now, I reckon you could probably count the number of people who are going to take their 7X onto a racetrack on less than one finger. But the point Zeekr is trying to make, I suppose, is that a little bit of driving fun isn't off the table in this car. That said, it's fair to say it's really not a track vehicle. It is big, it is heavy, and you certainly can feel that weight shifting around. But it doesn't feel underdone either. It feels like the kind of car that could be quite a lot of fun on the right twisting road. The power is properly immense. We'll get to the straight in a moment and we'll put our foot down flat and see what we can get to. But there really is no shortage of acceleration in this thing. It turns in quite nicely as well. And in fact, the four-wheel grip of this does make this one feel far more lively, far sharper than the rear drive version. There's also not really an obscene amount of roll through the body either, but keep in mind you can't properly hide that weight. There's no magic tricks at work here. It's still a big and heavy vehicle. But the fact that you can trundle out onto a racetrack in a family-friendly SUV that really isn't that much slower than a 911 Carrera GTS is pretty astonishing, really. It shows just what electrification has done for car performance. So we're coming onto the main straight now. We'll put our foot down, use all of the track. We're already sitting at 130, 140, 150, 160. We're starting to run out of power now. In the rear-wheel drive, I was clipping 200 kilometers an hour plus on the main straight. In this car, at about 150 kilometers an hour, it started to wash off acceleration. And I think the reason is we're down to 69 kilometers of range left and about 13% of the battery. And I think it's probably gone into some sort of survival mode, limiting the power to make sure you can get home. And if I'm being totally honest with you, that's not something you find too often in petrol-powered vehicles. Will let you push until you just stop moving. But again, I really can't see too many people taking this thing on track. In fact, I can't see anyone taking it on track ever, really. But if you do, make sure there's a battery close by. I gotta say though, it does feel remarkably competent and composed. This all-wheel drive version is far more athletic than the rear drive version. It's actually quite a bit of fun. Okay, so we're back onto the main straight. Let's see if it does it again. So foot flat to the floor, pushing through 100, 120. No, you can actually feel that accelerator response is at 3/4. In fact, now it's at half. So it's literally drained half the power away from my right foot, which explains why it doesn't feel as quick on this straight as the rear drive version, although it does feel far more competent through the corners.
Okay, so away from the racetrack, which to be honest really makes a lot more sense for a car like this, and we find ourselves behind the wheel of the all-wheel drive on a kind of gravel road, the kind of thing you find dotted all over country Australia. And I do just want to add one small caveat to this, and that is that we've driven this car currently on a racetrack, now on a gravel road, and soon we'll do a little bit of off-roading. But the one thing we haven't done is just driven it on a suburban street. So how it performs on the road near your place, unfortunately for that, we're going to have to wait and see until we get it through the CarsGuide office. But for now, let me tell you what I can tell you. For the rest, I'm afraid you will have to wait. So from the very beginning, I can tell you that the all-wheel drive version has plenty of grunt and actually the better suspension. It's got an air suspension setup that's fully adaptive. It feels far more composed, far more controlled, especially when you're traveling at speed. But if you're not taking the car to a racetrack, and I don't suspect many of you will be, the rear-wheel drive actually offers plenty of power. It's not like push you back in your seat, rocket ship kind of stuff, but it's more than enough power for everyday drivers. It would be more than enough power for me, and it's never going to feel as though you're underpowered or underdone. You're never going to be nervous overtaking. Plus you get the benefit of all that extra range. The rear-wheel drive long range version travels in excess of 600 Ks between charges. For me, that's probably the sweet spot in the range so far. Elsewhere though, it does feel quite tight and well put together. The steering is nice and direct. The ride, albeit on a billiard smooth racetrack, is pretty good as well. There's not a huge amount of body roll, nothing horrific. It feels really composed and controlled. It's also got that kind of point and shoot characteristics so common to EVs, where you put your foot down, all the power simply arrives and off you go. And again, while I can't tell you what it's like on the coarse bitumen near your place, I can tell you on the roads I've taken it on so far, it feels very quiet and very composed in the cabin. There's not a lot of road noise, not a lot of wind noise. It feels pretty well damped and deadened in here as well. So downsides, well, there's really not that many to report, to be honest. It performs better on a racetrack than you might expect a several ton SUV to do. It can feel a little doughy in its softer settings, but you can dial up the acceleration, the braking and the steering into sportier settings through your center screen. And the cabin feels largely calming and cosseting on most road surfaces, including this very loose gravel road. The biggest downside, I suppose, is that I really don't know what it's like to drive on the actual street. And let's face it, that is where this car is going to spend all of its time. So for a full and detailed review, I'm so sorry, you're just going to have to bear with us. For now, I'm afraid you're just going to have to consider this a taste test of this vehicle. But so far, it has impressed.
The 7X wears a 5-star Euro NCAP crash rating, and I just want to point out one pretty wild feature. Standard across all trims is a high-def camera in the B-pillar aimed at the rear seats. You can cover it if you feel like you want some extra privacy, but the idea is that anyone in the front can hit a button near the central screen that will pull up a high-def feed of exactly what's happening in the back seat. So no more having to turn around to see what the kids are up to. The Zeekr 7X is covered by a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, while the battery is covered for 8 years or 160,000 kilometres. There's 5 years of roadside assistance thrown in too. Servicing is demanded every 2 years or 40,000 kilometres, with what the brand describes as optional health checks in years 1, 3 and 5, with the first one of those entirely on the house. Go for all the services, including the optional ones, and you're looking at $2,415 over the first 5 years. Skip the optional ones and it's more like $1,755. Not the most comprehensive of tests, this one, I'm afraid, but the early signs are good for the Zeekr 7X, which ticks plenty of on-paper boxes, looks sleek and fresh, and feels pretty sorted from behind the wheel too.